All right. Hello, everybody. If you're in Portland, happy rainy May 19th, 2022. I want to start the Urban Forestry Commission meeting for this month. Appreciate you all showing up. Really glad to have you engaged in this conversation. Again, Vivek Chandas, and have the privilege of chairing this committee or commission through February of next year, I think is when my time is up. And we've had conversations about these particular terms and things like that. So I want to open it up with public comments. I see some folks from the public joining us. Brian, do we have anything in terms of comments?
So just to clarify, this is not the public comment period for our public hearing on Title 11 amendments. These are just sort of general comments. That public hearing will start at 10. But if anyone would like to provide comment now, no one signed up ahead of time, but if anyone wants to raise their hand right now, we have a few minutes for that. I'm not seeing anyone, so I think we can, oh.
There we go, I see.
Yeah, Diane here, let me allow you into the meeting. Okay, Diane, you should be able to speak now.
So I have a question. Is it better to wait and do the 10 o'clock hearing, or will this also?
If your comments are specific on the Title 11 amendments that are being proposed, I would ask that you wait until the public hearing begins at 10.
And it's the same group that would be listening?
Yes, yeah, all of us here.
Could I do this? My schedule is such that if I could just say my comments now and then send them in, is that possible? Send them by email?
Sure, yeah, I think we have a few minutes for that, sure thing.
Okay, and then could I send that to you?
Yes,
or, okay.
Sure thing, yeah,
okay,
great.
I will do that, okay.
Okay.
So let me just go to my comments. Sorry. Okay, so I've lived in, my name's Diane Meisenhelter, and I've lived in upper Northeast Portland for 33 years in a shade deficient area where the right-of-ways are too narrow for large form trees. I volunteer with the NAACP Environmental Justice Committee, Extinction Rebellion, and as a member of my neighborhood emergency team, worked the cooling shelters last summer during the heat dome. I'm also new to trying to understand the tree code after fighting to save several old giant trees on my block. So apologize ahead of time if parts of my testimony are outside the technical amendments, as we understand there are further work to be done on the tree code after the urban forestry management plan. Because of the pressing nature of our concerns, we hope the process might be expedited by the city proceeding simultaneously on the two efforts together, as we are losing large numbers of trees in need of protection from an outdated code. We applaud the work that's been done by Urban Forestry on these amendments and support their acceptance, and yet feel they do not go far enough in terms of preservation goals. Particularly in low-income East Side neighborhoods, it's critically important to preserve giant old trees for their sequestration, shade equity, and other community resource value. While we applaud the added powers in the amendments for the urban forester, it's time that we truly view old giants as a valuable resource for the common good, as outlined in the first section of Title 11. Thus, the knowledge of the urban forester in certain areas and circumstances should be able to be used to provide protective heritage tree designations, even on private property. This is especially true in the case of large form trees on development sites where urban forestry needs to have an enhanced role in the demolition and site planning processes in what is currently the domain of BDS. In reviewing the Title 11 document for this hearing, there are numerous places where more protections are needed. We're concerned about the city's tracking process on existing tree removals and whether the removal of up to 4 healthy trees per year takes into consideration previous removals within an area. Under Type B permits, additional protection criteria should be added under 2D for trees over 20 to 36 inches in communities experiencing shade deficiencies. Public notifications of large tree removals need to have more than on-site signage and neighborhood association notification, at least notifying neighbors on that block and having an effective public appeal process. In this time of climate chaos, we need to move beyond the current pay-to-slay model, since replacement trees will take decades to reach the sequestration, shade, and other values of these in old endangered giants, as illustrated by current Water Bureau rules, PBOT plans, or this afternoon's hearing on RIP 1 and 2. There are constant threats and restrictions that threaten the already limited options for planting sites. Therefore, more protective changes should come sooner rather than later, given our shrinking canopy and the, sorry, I can't see the last word of my testimony, sorry. And the pressing need to address the climate and equity issues we collectively face. Sorry about that. I feel silly giving this to Dr. Shonda's this testimony, but thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Diane. Really well taken, well said. Any responses, Roberta?
Yeah, thank you, Diane. I just had one question. Were you speaking, you use the term we, are you speaking for the ACLU Environmental Justice Group or a certain group? Or are you speaking for as an individual? Oops, is she gone?
Oh, sorry. Okay,
Oh,
Diane,
she's muted. Yeah.
Oh,
there we
here
go.
we go. I'm speaking primarily from the action team for Extinction Rebellion. However, I report back on these issues to the NAACP Environmental Justice Committee, who are also watching and very concerned about the heat island issues. And actually the chair of that committee, J. Risha Brannon, is doing some research with Harvard, and we'll probably be talking to Dr. Shonda's about data in that particular area. She's very, very concerned.
Great. Brian, will you forward Diane's comments to the commission when you
Sure
get
thing.
them? Thanks.
Will do.
Thanks, Diane.
Thank you.
Right, anybody, any other public comments?
Don't think we have any more right now.
Okay. All right. As you all may have seen, we have a set of minutes for February, and it may have taken your eyes a little moment to adjust to the level of detail there. And so encourage you, especially the newer commissioners, to kind of get a sense for really what we're looking for. This is public record. This goes up on our website. It is accessible. So what we're really looking for your input on are any inaccuracies, any revisions, redactions on it, or anything that would potentially create confusion in the way that we're deliberating around specific topics that come up in the minutes. So I want to encourage you to take a look at those. Usually give a couple of minutes. Hopefully you had a chance to look at them prior. Brian usually has a chance to send them out about 24 hours ahead of time. So I want to just still give you a little bit of time to look through that February 17 minutes and see if there's any edits, friendly amendments, other topics you want to bring up, clarifications.
And I'll add that Bruce did send me a few edits this morning that I've incorporated in those, mostly misspellings, a few inaccuracies. So see Roberta's hand up.
Yes.
Do you, if we weren't there, because we weren't on the commission yet, I didn't review, I mean, I reviewed them, but I didn't review them. Yeah, because I wouldn't vote on them, right?
Yes,
I think that's fine.
You're abstaining.
Thanks.
Thanks, Roberta. All right. Any commissioners who are present, any comments on this?
Daniel, yeah.
Yeah. How about like individual word type things? I mean, I don't have any like factual things, but there were a couple things. Should I just mention it
Sure.
out loud?
Yeah.
There was something in my comment here on the Title 11 amendments project update. I'm not sure what was trying to be said, but it says something about since the constitutions of what's dying or dangerous. I think probably the word is probably something like the designation of what's dying or dangerous.
Mhm.
And it says some have in some instances been contended. I think, I'm not sure what that word was supposed to be, maybe contentious, I don't know. Contested,
Hmm.
probably,
Yeah.
but anyway,
That's probably what it was. Yeah.
probably that. So I know this is minor, but
No, that's helpful.
it would help with the, yeah. And I just want to say, Ashley, wow, this was your first meeting minutes. Wow, this is like transcript caliber. Wow.
All right, Bruce.
Oops, sorry. I wanted to make sure, I sent these to Brian, but there were a few I wanted to make sure that I was understood. Under the citywide canopy report update, there's a bullet under the first, there's a statement, Vivek noted that areas that had very little canopy in 2014 seem to be increasing in canopy incrementally. And I don't think that's what Vivek said, but maybe I misunderstood him. So I wanted to be sure that particular section captures what Vivek said.
Yeah, Bruce, I looked at that too carefully, and it is actually correct. It's accurate in the sense that very low canopy areas saw a marginal increase in tree canopy, and the very high amount of canopy areas saw a increase in canopy. There's this kind of U shape that we're noticing in the canopy loss or change. So from my point of view, I think that was incremental, marginal, slight increase. I think is in the ballpark and is reflective of at least what I was trying to convey.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Checking.
And I see Ashley's hand up.
Yep.
Hi all. Thanks. I'm eagerly listening, and I'm eager to learn the kinds of things that you prefer. You noted the transcript status. It's because I actually both watched the video and downloaded a transcript of the minutes in order to more accurately try to use your words when summarizing as much as possible. So Brian might have mentioned trying to find the balance between brevity and so yeah, I'm eager for any and all feedback. Can't wait to get you more of those minutes coming up in the future.
Yeah, Ashley, thanks for that. And commissioners, I think that's an open invitation, sounds like, to be able to characterize the minutes in ways that would be really helpful to you to make sure we're keeping track and able to follow up. Now, several months later, I go back looking at these, Ashley, I can just say, I am in that meeting when I am looking at this, and it's really like that level of high definition for me.
I appreciate that so many of the bullets start with the person's name who made the comment. That really helps me keep track of and remember back to our conversation. So keep it up.
All right, great. So I need a motion if there's been a couple of friendly amendments, small amendments on like Daniel's, and then Bruce, you'd submitted some prior, and I think we got clarification on one of them. I need a motion to be able to move on approving these minutes, and those new commissioners would abstain, but who's offering a motion? Adrian, I see your hand up.
I move to approve the minutes with the suggested amendments by the commissioners.
All right, a second. Bruce seconds. All in favor, virtual or actual?
Can I just ask a quick clarification? Are we doing March and February together, or just March and just February?
I think you can do both
Okay,
together. That's fine. Yeah.
great. I just wanted to make certain we all knew what we were looking at.
Yeah. Thanks.
Uh,
Bruce, is that a second for both or holding on?
No, we haven't gone over March. We just went over February.
So do you need a minute for the March minutes, or do we want to hold off on that and vote next time?
I have substantive concerns about the reporting of some of the statements in the March meeting. Granted, I was not at the meeting, but I've listened to the tape carefully, and it could be I just disagree with urban forestry. It may be that the minutes are accurate, but I'll do whatever the commission decides on this.
Other commissioners, substantive concerns enough to wait and push to next time, or do we want to go through any of your concerns today, Daniel? I mean, Bruce.
It's your call. I mean, I know we have other agenda items, and I don't think it would be a 2-minute discussion.
Yeah, I move to approve February, so why don't we just go with that and then have people have an opportunity to submit comments in writing for the others for March.
Okay.
I'm good with that. So second stands just for February. So we're voting just on February. Adrian's motion, Bruce seconds, virtual, or unless there's any other comments, virtual or physical hand. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And any nays? Any abstentions? 1, 2, 3. Okay, Melinda, is that an abstention as well, or? Okay. So passed, thank you. Let's keep moving along here. We're gonna, anything else, Brian?
Nope. I think we can move to the Foresters report.
Okay, Forestry report, let's jump in.
All right. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, Jen is now sick, so I'll be filling in for her there. So I have a few items for this report, but I'll also end with a substantive policy issue that hopefully at the end of the meeting we can talk more about. This just came up, and so I'll give a little bit of intro, but I think we'll have some time at the end of the meeting to talk more about it. But first, just a few updates on our permitting and regulation side. The permitting group is continuing to work through a backlog that was created as a result of the April 11th storm event that we experienced. Mostly this is on the back end of getting storm data updated in our permitting software and all the follow-ups to those storm responses. 8 PPNR staff were temporarily reassigned to assist urban forestry, and we've just hired 4 additional community service aides who are going to start on June 9th to continue to help us dig out that backlog. So just to give you a sense of the scale of that storm event, and so you should, if you are for anyone who is submitting permits or submitting any kind of inquiries to our trees at email address, definitely expect a slower response than typical as we work through that. Some of you might have seen that the Bureau of Transportation's pedestrian design guideline was signed. I believe it was on Thursday or Friday of last week. That was signed by the PBOT Bureau Director, and it goes into effect July 1st. I'll note that there are some significant improvements for trees, including among some other positive changes in the most recent draft that expanded the planting strip for local streets from 4 feet to 6 feet. That was a change, and a very last minute change. And so while not everything that urban forestry advocated for, the new guide does mark quite a positive shift from the guidelines the city's been operating under for the last 20-25 years. Jen is not here, but I really want to note her really exceptional work on this, as well as Casey Jogers, the permitting regulation manager, and Rick Faber, our permitting coordinator. these are issues they've been working on with PBOT for years, literally years, and seeing some of them be codified is really encouraging. And of course, enormous gratitude to the Urban Forestry Commission and the many community members who provided comments and really demonstrated to PBOT the public desire to see more space for street trees. So thank you all for your efforts on that. And to the Bureau of Transportation as well. They were really good partners throughout this. So I want to acknowledge them. A few more items. Street tree inventory is back. We are beginning the project to update the street tree inventory. 6 seasonal staff have been hired. There are going to be 5 volunteer days announced over the course. I think that's over this summer. And then the youth conservation crew is going to be helping out with that project as well. So stay tuned for some volunteer opportunities for that project. I believe we're at about 218,000 street trees the last time the inventory was done. So really exciting opportunity to get that inventory updated. Next on my list is our recruitment for new urban forestry commissioners. Is live. It is going to be quite a lengthy recruitment. It will run through August 1st, and we're going to be working really closely with the Bureau's community expanded community engagement team over the next few months on outreach for those. So we have 2 open seats. So please spread the word on that opportunity. Last thing is the policy issue. So this is, Vivek, I apologize. We haven't had a chance to even talk about this. This came up in the last 2, I think it was on Tuesday that we learned about this. So I've updated you on the residential infill project part 2 over the last few months. If you recall, this is a project to bring certain large residential lots. They're zoned R10 and R20. These are very large, 10,000, 20,000 square foot lots. It was simply a project to bring Portland's Title 33 zoning code into compliance with state law. State law requires that cities allow certain types of development to occur on those lots. We've been working with the RIP2 project team. We had a few concerns that the project team addressed. And so we've been obviously supportive of this project throughout the course of it. At the City Council's first public hearing last week, an amendment was proposed. I believe this was initiated by advocates obviously concerned about the housing affordability crisis that Portland is experiencing. This amendment would allow 2-story sixplexes, sort of imagine sort of 6 townhomes in a row, to be legal in all R5 lots. Those are your typical single-family dwelling lots that we see in all over Portland. And it would allow expanded lot coverage that goes beyond what the original residential infill project allowed. It's at about 60% lot coverage. This is moving very quickly. The second public hearing is today, and comments are due by 2 o'clock. Urban Forestry has some concerns where it's looking based on the diagrams we've seen of what these developments would look like. We don't really see space for any tree preservation on site because of the way that the building structures occupy the lot. And they really chop up the open space in a way into 6 very small zones that doesn't look like they could accommodate even Title 11's tree planting standards. We don't know for sure, but because this has happened so quickly. And so that is, we are planning right now to submit comments on behalf of the Parks Bureau, mostly about just the lack of clarity on what this could mean for trees. So I wanted to make you all aware, but maybe perhaps we have to start the public hearing at 10. And so we can't let this conversation go right now, but perhaps at the end of the meeting, we can return to this and talk a little bit more about if the UFC would like to provide public comment at 2. The vote will not happen until June 1st, but the way that these land use hearings happen. Process is pretty important in getting getting things on the public record while it's open is a priority right now. So again, I don't want to overstate the impacts because they're mostly unclear. And our concern now is just this hasn't really had time to be looked at from stormwater issues, on-site tree preservation, on-site tree planting. So that's the gist of our comments. It's going to be, we would like to have more time to look at this, but I want to bring it all to your attention. And that's the end of my report. So we have a few minutes before the public hearing starts if anyone has any questions or other issues.
And we can come back to that last piece
Yeah.
later, Brian, because
Yeah.
there might be a lot more there.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, just a question, clarification really quickly. Is the street tree inventory, that's exhaustive, meaning all streets in the city, like last time? And then do you have a time frame for that? Like, that was multiple years last time, right? And so
Mhm.
is it the same approach this year?
Yeah, so it is exhaustive. It'll be all improved rights of way. So none of the unimproved streets on the West Hills or anything like that, where you're just having sort of like, not really an improved right of way with a planting strip. So it will be exhaustive in that sense. Yeah, I believe the plan is to do it in 2 years. It took much longer last time. We're hiring more staff this time around, which should allow it to get done in that 2-year period. Don't quote me on that. It might be a little bit longer, but I'm pretty sure that's what Angie's team has planned. I see Bruce filling up 3, so maybe it's 3 years.
Daniel?
Yeah, thanks. Few quick questions. Who's the contact at Urban Forestry for the street tree inventory?
Jeff Ramsey. He's going to be leading that project.
Okay, great. And then I did not see anything on the agenda, but at our last meeting, we had all requested hearing directly from the city attorney about the term limits issue. I think enough of us had raised that question again last time that it sounded like we were going to be able to get some clarification, because we still haven't received anything from the city attorney about that issue.
I apologize, Daniel. I don't think I realized there was a request to hear directly from the city attorney. I thought the request was just to include in the meeting minutes what we heard from the city attorney. So I apologize about that.
Well, I think an email directly from the city attorney.
For sure.
I think we wanted to see something that was not interpreted. We wanted to see something directly. Yeah. So that would be great. Thank you.
we can absolutely do that. Jen and I have met with the city attorney a few times, and we're following the guidance that we've received, but I'd be happy to get something from him for sure.
Thanks. That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for that reminder, Daniel. Adrienne?
Yeah, just a couple quick questions again about the street tree inventory. So I assume that's like 100% sampling versus, just a random sampling. So that was one question I had. And then also, do they have quality assessment and tree type? And then will there be adjustment for, number of streets that have been improved so that, it's kind of a apples to apples comparison?
Yeah, great question. So yes, they will visit every street tree. They measure the diameter at breast height. They measure the height. They do record a condition assessment. I think they are expanding the data they're collecting from the last time. So I can ask Jeff to provide a little bit of an update what they have planned. But and yeah, they would definitely be visiting any new streets to capture those as well.
Great. Thanks, Adrienne. Thanks, Brian. Bruce?
In the 2014 survey in Cully on unimproved streets, we were supposed to try to determine if street trees were present, and those were clearly unimproved streets. So it was explained to us what we look for: wires, water meters. So I assume it's going to be the same thing this year.
Probably, yeah. I think I was trying to distinguish between like a forested area on
Oh,
like the
okay.
west side or something. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
All right, and we are at 10:01, so I think we need to shift to the
Okay.
public hearing.
All right, so commissioners, this is an opportunity for us to hear from the public about any about the proposed changes to Title 11. You've received, Brian sent a set of materials about the specific language in Title 11, kind of in track changes, I think it was, as well as the summary of amendment changes from the middle of April, and also a kind of proposed set of changes that are the full list. And the specific section in the code where that would be made. So this is our chance to just really be listening for public comments and then clarifying questions as needed. And we have Nick here as well, who's been, I think, Brian, if I'm right, Nick's been on point. Is that right, Nick? You're kind of a key urban forestry staff on these changes?
Correct.
He is.
I am co-leading this project with Brian, a work science and policy work group.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. All right, well, let's, Brian, the format, so I understand we're kind of just opening it up, and folks coming in, we're trying to keep the feedback or testimony or comments to about 3 minutes. Is that sound about right?
Yeah. So we have a very brief PowerPoint just to kick this off to clarify mainly some of the changes that have been made. We heard a lot of feedback on the last round, and some amendments have been pulled and some have been changed. So Nick's going to give a quick overview of that. And then we'll have a public comment period. I have a few people have signed up ahead of time, but it looks like there are a few more people in attendance than signed up, which I think is fine. We'll have time to hear from those. And then at the end, it would be great if the UFC could hold a brief discussion and vote on whether they'd like to submit a comment to City Council in support of those. But Nick's going to get us started with a quick presentation here.
Okay, thanks, Brian. I hope that I'm sharing my screen. Can folks see that? Okay, great. So as I mentioned, quick recap of where we're at. So project overview, big picture. This is phase one of a larger project. Phase one involves minor and technical policy amendments for Title 11, the tree code. Phase two involves a long overdue update to our urban forest management plan that is slated to begin later this year. It will be a couple of year process, and phase three involves the more substantive updates to the tree code, informed by the updated data and updated goals set in the urban forest management plan. So it's a 3-phase project, and this is phase one. And we began this project last year. We drafted proposed amendments which were available for public comment and public review. Urban Forestry Commission, Planning and Sustainability Commission, and Bureau partners also were involved in the review process. That occurred in the spring of this year, earlier this year. We took that feedback and we incorporated a few changes. We received a lot of support for most of the amendments, but we took a critical look at a few specific amendment proposals and made some changes. So I just want to point out some of the significant changes that appear in the draft that you all have received and reviewed for today. So the first one is amendment number 5, grant City Forester authority to approve removal of dead heritage trees without UFC consent. We received a lot of comment about this and decided it was not quite the right time for this one. So we have removed it and we'll consider it for a future amendment project. Number 6 was add administrative review step to appeal process. And the original proposal was to have a 10-day timeline. We received feedback for that 14 days would be more consistent with other policies in other codes. That change was made. Number 10, consider tree removal impacts to other trees. So this one was proposed to be in both type A and type B, or in both sections of code. It is very much a type B situation. It involves more than just a quick review. It involves an in-depth analysis or investigation. So that applies to type Bs, and we took that out of the type A language. Number 36, definition of a dangerous tree to include threats to the urban forest, or definition of dangerous to include threats to the urban forest. This one was remarked to be rather vague, and so we did remove it. We will consider it for a future amendment process. It involves considering pests and pathogens and some very specific language around that. So we might look at that in phase 3. And finally, number 42, amend permit requirements for pruning in environmental overlay zones and wildfire hazard zones. Now, we did receive a lot of feedback that this was related to really loosening some of the restrictions and requirements and oversight in E zones, some of our most sensitive, environmentally sensitive areas of the city. We recognize the risks of wildfire with increased drought, but in review, our current pruning requirements are, they do allow for pruning and proactive management if you do own property in those zones. And so we are working with Portland Fire and Rescue to provide more education for property owners in those zones of what is allowed with the current pruning requirements and the ease with which pruning permits can be accessed for proactive management on these properties. Now, today we're going to be hearing public testimony. We have received some written testimony as well. This public testimony period will be followed by Urban Forestry Commission discussion. We will consider recommendations, and then one of the outcomes we are looking for is an appointee from the UFC to provide testimony to council, and we'll also look for a letter with written testimony as well, testimony and support. And our project timeline here on out, after today's hearing, we are we're taking this show on the road. We're going to the Planning and Sustainability Commission meeting on Tuesday, the 24th. We'll have a public hearing and we will hear recommendations from the PSC and the public at that time as well. And this culminates in a July 20th City Council hearing. And with that, I will close this little slideshow and we can take public comment and discuss. Thanks.
Just a quick clarification, Nick and Brian, did you have, can you say anything about the places where you, within the city that you have taken this and presented this? You've already taken it to PSC, I think, Planning Sustainability Commission. Did you go to other bureaus as well within the city, or even with external stakeholders and presented it there? Just a recap on that would be helpful.
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, we've taken it to the Planning and Sustainability Commission a few times. Also went to the Development Review Advisory Committee. And then in terms of bureau engagement, yes, we've been working with Bureau of Environmental Services, Water Bureau, Bureau of Transportation, BDS, Development Services, and Planning and Sustainability over the course of this project. So they've had multiple chances to provide comments as well.
All right, commissioners, or actually, we're opening it up to public now, I think it is, right? So this is public comment. So let's open it up to the public and go down the list, Brian.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Catherine Mushel. She signed up ahead of time, and so I'm gonna let her and me first, and then if there's anyone else in attendance who would like to provide comment, since we only have one signed up, we have time for people who didn't have a chance to sign up ahead of time. So feel free to raise your hand as well, and we'll work through that list. But I'm gonna let Catherine here first.
Hey, Catherine, welcome back to the commission. You might recognize some of us still.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vivek. And so I'm here on behalf of Trees for Life Oregon, and we really appreciate that you have put together a public hearing for testimony on the proposed Title 11 technical amendments. So we want to say we appreciate the commission's work now more than ever, and a flurry of recent tree-related bureau activities has our attention. So PBOT's April hearing on the allocation of space for trees in the pedestrian design guide, which Brian has already mentioned today. The Water Bureau's hearing yesterday, which included the 10-foot from tree to big pipe rule, which we're very worried about. RIP 1 and 2 allocation of outdoor area, which was drastically reduced in the R5 zones, and there's a driveway provision there that's got our attention too. Add to these that Commissioner Maps and Ryan are streamlining the Bureau of Development Services permitting processes. Streamlining may really put trees downstream. And then there are just so many proposed rules and practices that have reawakened our feeling that there's a necessity to defend the place of trees in bureau decisions and in city design. But there's more. Federal money coming for infrastructure improvements directs comparatively little to the urban forest as green infrastructure. And the state has appropriated $80 million to launch a 7-mile-long improvement project to transform 82nd Avenue, which is now a state highway, into a city street. Nearby communities have yet to see their hope for trees realized on 82nd Avenue. So we need the Urban Forestry Commission's voice now more than ever. For where there is funding, there will be change. And we want the change to include better tree preservation and better design for space for future trees. We believe urban forestry's technical amendment proposals will help to solidify the part of urban forestry in regulating infrastructure, and we support the proposed amendments. And here are some examples. Proposals 11 and 40 will help guide permitting by reconciling Title 11 and Title 33 inconsistencies on tree removal and landscaping requirements, adding pruning regulations on river greenway zones, and clarifying the definition of multifamily dwelling zones. Proposals 15, 16, 17, and 44 would improve early coordination relating to trees in private and city projects. Proposal 10 would help the city avoid the cascading impact of removing one tree, thus avoiding damaging nearby trees, but also potentially helping to preserve groves of interdependent trees. Avoiding hazards is crucial in urban forest management generally. Preserving groves is especially important in outer Southeast Portland, where mixed stands of Douglas firs, maples, and understory trees are invaluable forest remnants in areas of Multnomah County that the city annexed decades ago. Proposals 4, 27, and 32 further ensure forestry's regulatory authority. They enable the city forester to record heritage trees on property deeds, place liens on properties where violations of Title 11 provisions remain unresolved, and issue stop work orders while any permit provisions are put in place. Finally, proposals 1 and 2 get at the heart of why we need Title 11 itself, clarifying the meaning of the urban forest as green infrastructure and ensuring that capital improvements projects are regulated by Title 11. There has never been a more crucial time for all bureaus to integrate tree preservation and space for trees, especially large form trees, into their protocols and practices, and for the City Council to put the urban forest front and center in budgetary and policy decisions. Today, we are asking that the Urban Forestry Commission support urban forestry's proposed technical amendments. But given the many changes afoot, we would like you, the Urban Forestry Commission, to work with all deliberate speed to support a comprehensive update of Title 11 and the revision of the 2004 Urban Forest Management Plan sooner rather than later. Thanks, everyone. It's good to see all your faces.
Thanks, Catherine. Very helpful, very thorough. I like the categorizing of the different amendments. That was really helpful for me.
We worked together. We had help.
Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine. I see Chris Peskin has his hand raised. I'm going to bring him into the meeting as well.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Chris. I live on near Forest Park, near Fire Lane 15. I'm also a member of the Firewise community that we've recently established in the Forest Park neighborhood. We have two areas, north and south, and we're working with Portland Fire and Rescue to help create awareness of managing defensible space for homeowners in the area. Many of these lots border Forest Park and are very rural and field. And so one of the concerns is just reducing the friction for homeowners who live within city limits and may also be in E-zones, often in E-zones, but are also in wildfire hazard zones. Reducing the friction of permitting and figuring out what you can and can't do, which I know you guys mentioned you're trying to improve education around that, which is good, but there is a lot of overhead of just navigating the code, and if there's a cost of a permit whatsoever, that's friction, and if you are required to use a licensed contractor, a lot of people, either from a cost standpoint, that's prohibitive, right? And they want to be able to do it themselves. So you need to look at specifically what the homeowner has to go through to figure out, what's possible, either trimming or removing trees, but just pruning in general. And there seems to be an inconsistency because the Forest Park or Portland Parks and Recreation has a nature programmatic permit to allow pruning within 200 feet of structures within Forest Park. Now, I realize you have people on staff and foresters to help oversee that activity, but that costs money that the city has at its disposal that individual homeowners don't, right? And if we want to get a permit and do something equivalent, it's much more prohibitive. If the sentiment is 200 feet of defensible space for Forest Park from structures, I don't see why a property adjacent to Forest Park shouldn't be allowed something similar. Right now, it's 30 feet. That's asymmetrical for whatever reason. And I don't think it's enough. So I would like to see, and Portland Fire and Rescue also recommended 100 feet. At least that was what was in this proposed Title 11 change before it was removed. So I'd push for 200 feet if that's what you're trying to do within Forest Park as well. That's pretty much all I had to say.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. All right. I don't see any other hands raised, so I want to give just another moment here. See if anyone else has a comment they'd like to provide. All right.
Okay. So I guess I open it up to commissioners for clarifications, questions, further discussion about the set of amendments, Nick's presentation. Any deliberation there? I think we're going to have to move to a vote here shortly. But anything coming up for y'all about what we might need to flesh out a bit more, or any concerns? I see Roberta and then Bruce.
Yeah, well, first of all, I really commend Nick and Brian and the team for this work. I read through all the amendments again, and there's a lot there. They're narrow, but they're important. And I think that it makes Title 11 a living document, and I think that's really great. And I appreciate all the great testimony that's come in as well. So I guess just thinking about the comment about wildfire, you know, this issue did come up during the E-zone hearings at City Council. It came up, it's come up in various forums, and I hear the need to look hard at appropriate ways to encourage appropriate pruning, you know, and making defensible space, as Chris Peskin suggested. I was concerned about the, you know, completely exempting the pruning of conifers within 100 feet of structures. I was envisioning all the lots where if you had 100 feet on all sides of a structure, you could have entire regions or neighborhoods or hilltops, or, you know, that would be where there would be essentially no regulation of pruning, where there is some oversight now through a type, I think it's a pruning permit without a fee. But, you know, so I guess my perception is, and Brian, you can correct me, that the cost of the permit is, we don't charge a fee for the pruning permit in the E-zone. So that's a considerable difference than removing tree removal permits, which have a cost for one or more trees that's prorated. So I think it's an issue of time, maybe more than anything else, where if for coming on fire season and people want to prune their trees and you have this permit backlog that we've been hearing about, that's a scary thing. I mean, what we wouldn't want is to have the city, we have a big fire, we look back and say, well, we would have pruned our trees, but the city couldn't get to our permit in time, you know? So that does worry me a little bit. I'm a big E-zone supporter, and you know, and I work on environmental overlay zoning, but I think that while I appreciate the removal of the amendment because it had implications that were bigger than a technical amendment, I'm not sure it should wait for 4 years. I think there's something else that needs to happen, and whether it could happen between now and City Council, I think there are alternatives that are hybrids of kind of what the proposal was that would, you know, maybe bring it 30 feet for all trees instead of just 30 feet for conifers as it is in the code now. Another option is to consider the street tree pruning permits. People can issue them themselves online. They have to go in and sign up and say they're not going to butcher the tree. And according to staff, that's been working pretty well. I think that might be something to try. But anyway, I guess my thinking is maybe when the Urban Forestry Commission takes action on this, that part of our message in our letter to the City Council that we will also copy the PSC is that we do encourage a prompt attention to continue dealing with this issue ahead of some of the broader code amendments that are coming, because climate is changing, fire season is changing. So that's my other point. One other quick thing I have a little concern about is the addition of the administrative procedure prior to appeal. You guys know much more about the appeal stuff than I do, all of you, I think. But when you see a new step that someone has to apply for, where they're asking the city, they're trying to show the city forester that they erred in their issuing the permit in the first place, and they have to do that before they apply for an appeal, it seems a little bit like, you know, if there is an error found, then what happened there? And if there isn't an error found, then they've had to pay, if there's a fee, they've had to pay for the review twice. I mean, essentially. So I'm just a little concerned about that. I'm wondering if there's a way to wrap the administrative review into a more comprehensive appeal process. One fee, if there's found to be an error, then they get part of their money back or something like that, rather than having two separate applications that really the person wants to appeal the decision and then they have to do this and they have to do this. So those are my comments. Otherwise, I think it's a great job. For all the reasons Catherine said, I would support this and commend the staff and the city for doing this.
Thanks, Roberta. Bruce and Pedestrian?
In Chris Peshkin's testimony, this is regarding pruning and being in the fire zone, those sorts of things. I don't live in one of the areas that is designated as a, one of these fire zones. And I know I've talked about this issue with different individuals, and I've certainly listened to things from the state talking about defensible zone, and it's a difficult conversation to have, because on the one hand, it talks about give me no vegetation within 100 feet of my house. And what do you have left in Portland if you do that in these fire zones? But I understand if I have the privilege of living kind of right adjacent to Forest Park and enjoy the incredible benefits of that, and I think there's a danger of fire, and I don't know anything about pruning, it's a little scary. I want to, do I cut trees down to the ground? Do I just pay lowest price and get somebody who doesn't know what they're doing and they hack away, which is of course my fear. But I think the education component is really important, and people who live in those areas need to feel like they have options that are viable and affordable. And so I'm hoping Urban Forestry and the Fire Bureau will aggressively reach out and meet with those people and try to address their concerns. No, Urban Forestry is not going to do the pruning. I know that. That's not what your staff is for. But if people, they will do the pruning whether the city wants it or not, if they are angry enough. And so I think hopefully we don't want it to come to that, because those trees are providing habitat, they're part of that forest. So it's a sticky issue, that's all I'm saying. I don't have an answer on it, but I think the education, the reaching out, the one-on-one hand-holding. I'm sorry, this is not an email, mass bulk email. This is one-on-one hand-holding to get through this. So that's all.
All right, thanks, Bruce. Adrienne?
Yeah, so this is sort of a larger strategic comment or question. I'm sorry if we've answered it before, but yeah, I want to commend the group working on this set of changes for how much community input and thought that they've given into this. A lot of the comments are related to sort of larger strategic issues, especially the comments we heard earlier before we got into the formal public hearing. And that sort of relates to the timeline of changing the overall tree code. And so my question is, for some of the more, I'll call them egregious loopholes, so to speak, that we're really concerned about, that are, highly impactful for reduction in the canopy, are those going to be on a faster timeline or prioritized compared to other, more administrative rules for the sort of the next phase of this? Or are we looking to the next phase being a completion and then, going forward to trying to get them amended?
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. I can answer that. So our original project plan, when we went to City Council back in March of 2021, I'm sorry, June 2021, was to have really what that first slide that Nick showed, this sort of 3-step process where we do these technical amendments, we would update the urban forest management plan, and then we would have a substantive Title 11 project that would be informed by the updated UFMP. We are hearing urgency, and I think we're also feeling the urgency. And so we have been having some conversations of what could a sort of co-track urban forest management plan and code amendment project look like? Could those amendments be identified in the course of the urban forest management plan update? That would then put us in a position to propose those amendments right as that plan is finalized, rather than starting the project at that point. So yeah, we are feeling that. There are some really there are some parts of code that we know are leading to tree loss. The city of Milwaukee actually just passed a new tree code, and if you read through it, it looks very similar to ours with some pretty significant differences that are very similar to the kind of changes we would like to make. So yeah, we're definitely hearing that, and we are looking at what a sort of expedited process could look like.
That's great. Yeah, wonderful.
Agreed. Thanks, Adrian, Brian. Daniel?
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Good job. And I think it's interesting to think of how much work it's taken to get to this point. And these are just the technical changes. And we've got this group of substantive changes on the horizon. I'll be curious to see what the plan is. We should probably start earlier than we think we need to make sure that gets done on a timeline. Had a question on number 8, and that has to do with no new information on the appeals. And I understand where that's coming from, and I agree with you on this. I think there's another piece that I'd just like to get clarified, and that is if new information comes in that the applicant feels is really important to their case, is it allowed in current Title 11 for them to request a postponement without having to like reapply or pay any more fees? I just wanted to find out about that.
That is a good question. Rick is, I'm wondering if Rick is on the call. I don't know if he's here actually.
Yes.
Oh, good. Rick, can you
So the answer is yes.
Okay.
There's I don't have the language right in front of me. I can look it up if we need it, but there is the ability to postpone. There's the ticking clock doesn't just cut them off as long as everybody's in agreement with the extending the time frame for reason. And having more information would be a very valid reason to have more time.
Okay, good. Just wanted to clarify that, since at least during the time I was on the appeals board, there were several people who expressed kind of a difficulty with having to pay $250 to file an appeal. And you know, a lot of folks they're trying hard to comply with the tree code, and I've certainly seen in my neighborhood, and I'm sure everybody else has, plenty of people who either don't know about the tree code or totally ignore it. So you know, that's good that we can reduce hardships for people who are honestly trying to comply with the tree code. So thank you.
Bruce?
I just want to be sure I understand what Rick said. If I make an appeal of an urban forestry ruling, and I pay my $250, I submit the paperwork, and it gives reasons as to why I'm appealing it. But the actual hearing hasn't occurred yet, even though I've turned in my paperwork. If new evidence comes to me before the hearing, I can present that new evidence at the hearing. Is that correct?
So the concern with new evidence at the hearing is that Urban Forestry hasn't had a chance to review it. So what typically would happen is somebody brings new evidence at the hearing. The appeals board says, hey, Urban Forestry, have you been able to take this under consideration? Urban Forestry says, no, this is the first time we've seen it. And they say, hearing is postponed, go review this, come back
Okay.
to us with a
Okay.
new decision.
Okay.
And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to not waste anybody's time, honestly, is to make sure that Urban Forestry has had everything in their hands, able to review it before we take it to the Urban Forestry Appeals Board.
Okay. Thank you.
Roberta, I want to come to you in a sec. I just want to make sure, just process-wise, is there any other commissioner who hasn't spoken about this either earlier or even today that would like a moment to even voice either their support, their yeah, or otherwise for these sets of amendments, if you had a chance to look at them and you're tracking some of the conversation? Okay. All right. Just want to make space for making sure we're all able to connect and chime in on this. So we are going to go to vote. And Roberta, I'm going to come back to you.
Well, the only reason is because if we're talking about the appeals process, and it is sort of a thing as people have been raising, is I was wondering if the staff had any feedback on the question about that additional administrative review step and how that kind of fits with
Sure.
the intent not to overburden the process.
Absolutely. So the intent there is not to have a second fee. The intent between the amendment is to demonstrate what we're already doing. Anytime that somebody files an appeal, we don't just turn it straight to the Urban Forestry Commission. We do an internal review. So we already conduct an internal administrative review, and we just want to place that in the code as the expectation. It mimics and mirrors the enforcement chapter, where it has a similar situation with an administrative review that would then go to an appeal to the code hearings office. So that there shouldn't be an additional cost. It's simply codifying the procedure that we've already found ourselves doing.
Just a couple of quick clarifications. Brian, Nick, did you run this by, there are many different bureaus that connect with trees in some way. Did you run this by BES? Any formal connections there?
Yeah, we did work with Bureau of Environmental Services, mostly the engineering group, since most of these amendments that BES had questions about impacted what the city forester's role in capital improvement projects.
Okay, well, that's great. And one other clarification, or at least I guess this is a bigger topic than we probably have time for. I just wanted to like flag it as a kind of maybe something to come back to, is the question of Nick, in your presentation, you had 2022 to 2024 was the revision of the urban forest management plan, and we're woefully delayed in that for some time. I'm so glad to see that like showing up more and more in each of our conversations. Yeah. So I'm just curious, do these amendments in any way, have you kind of screened these amendments in any way that would help kind of, I don't know, bolster or catalyze or maybe accelerate some of the conversations that we're going to have in that are likely more substantive, deeper, broader for that revision of the urban forest management plan? Like, is there any interaction there? Are these so incremental that they're not really going to play into that urban forest management plan, and that they're you see where I'm going with this? Is like, is there anything in this that could impede or improve or in any way affect the 2022 to 2024 development of the urban forest management plan. You put it through that lens.
Are you referring to the current process, how it affects the UFMP update?
Not so much process, but I'm thinking about the specific amendments that are being proposed.
That's a good question. I see them as separate, and these will not have impact on the UFMP, the Urban Forest Management Plan update process. I would also say that what we brought to council was the proposal to have 3 distinct phases, and there's potential for overlap with phase 2 and phase 3. We've already done a lot of groundwork in collecting information to inform proposed updates, and we've seen some that would fall into the phase 3 category, which we can start doing research and data collection on much sooner than the proposed 2024. So they can overlap, phase 2 and phase 3 can overlap to a certain extent. That might have gone beyond the initial question there.
Okay, all right. So in a way, they're really distinct phases in a way that at least the way that the urban forestry is looking at it, like this is one set of amendments that we're going forward on. Then there's kind of, let's do a totally new process for the urban forest management plan, and then phase 3 as well.
Well, I'd say phase 1 is the most distinct. Phase 2 and phase 3 have some overlap. And phase 1 certainly has informed phase 3 to a certain extent.
Have you learned anything, I guess, from this process that could help inform more on your process side, that could help inform the way you approach the urban forest management plan?
I think the first thing is that everything takes longer than expected. But we certainly have the framework in place right now to hit the ground running for phase 3.
All right. Yeah, anything we can do to help move that piece, that work along, I think I'm sure the commissioners are glad to pitch in on. Megan, I see your hand up.
Thanks. And I feel like my comment are probably very much in vein with what you've just been talking about, is in thinking about it, and someone referenced this earlier, right? For the update of the urban forestry management plan, like, is there gonna be like a simultaneous, like trying to address what the future amendments are while making the update? Because I almost feel like if you go through and update it and then you get all of these comments about what should be amended to Title 11, it kind of feels like more of a simultaneous process than getting that and then needing to go back and make changes. So I'm just kind of curious. I know you kind of just said, Nick, like it's a little squishier, but I'm just curious if there's thoughts about how that process will occur. And maybe whether we're going to start having some of those conversations as a commission on the sooner side.
Yeah, I'd say that it's quite likely that we will be able to do a lot of the groundwork for we can anticipate what some of those amendments will be, and get started on some of that. I think it really also depends on the capacity that we have to do the work simultaneously, but we recognize the urgency of it. Brian, do you have anything to add to that?
I think just that we've gathered excuse me, we've, over the course of Title 11 being implemented, we've developed a list of amendments that we would like to see. The UFC over the years has presented a list of amendments we'd like to see, and I think through this current process we've identified a few more. So we really have that list, and I think during the urban forest management plan update, we would expect to. I mean, part of the purpose of that is to identify what are the challenges facing the urban forest, what are we seeing out there, and what are the goals we currently have, and how do those goals need to be changed to better align with the issues of climate change, for example, that we're seeing. So I think the more that we've kind of thought about what beginning that process will look like, it has become clear that, yeah, I think there is going to be some sort of dual track potential there, because as we're working through that plan, the solutions I think are going to start showing themselves as well. So we really could be coming out of the urban forest management plan update process with a list of pretty clear potential code changes that would then go through a more public process, rather than having to sort of scope things at that time too.
That's great to hear. It's good to hear. Bruce, and then Nick.
Is the urban forest management plan, does that have to be approved by city council, or is that an administrative rule?
That is I am pretty sure it's an administrative rule, but I will have to check that, Bruce. I haven't,
Okay.
that's a really great question.
I presume council would have to like set aside money for it and approve the kind of budget request, which suggests to me that they would have to then, they might have to then see the product of what they've actually paid, they're suggesting pay for. But anyway, that's I'm sure in code somewhere.
Yeah, definitely funding has been one reason that the plan has not been updated until now. But Bruce, I'm looking at Title 11. It says the plan will be periodically, at least every 10 years, be reviewed and updated to respond to changes in the condition of urban forest, changes in city policy, or changes to applicable regulatory mandates. I'm not seeing in there a distinct clarity on whether it needs to be. Greg is chiming in on the chat and saying it has to be adopted by city council. So we will have to as we scope what that project looks like, getting some clarity on that will have to happen.
Right. Great, thanks. Nick.
Thanks. I just want to quickly respond to some of the Firewise comments, just to say that I just acknowledge that we hear that feedback, and also recognize that the piece of education is really important. There's a lot that's misunderstood about what's allowed currently in code. And I want to confirm that it's a free permit, and it's an arborist report for a pruning plan that's required. And the current process is far more improved and streamlined than process that we've had in the past, which required an environmental impact report and review. And so this is a much faster process. What about licensed? I see a comment from Chris. What about licensed contractor required? Rick can maybe provide more information, but as far as I know right now, it's just an arborist plan that's involved for work to be done.
Yeah, I don't believe there's a requirement that it be a licensed contractor.
Correct.
Yep.
The code simply says that a plan by an arborist has to be made. The work doesn't even have to be done by an arborist. The plan has to be made by an arborist.
All right. I think the process now is to really check in with commissioners and see if we're ready for a vote on this. Do we formally vote, or are we approving this, or what, in a different format? Or Brian, what's—
Yeah, so the ask here is that we would love, when we send this package to City Council, for it to be accompanied by a statement from the Urban Forestry Commission showing support for the amendments, and potentially having invited testimony as well if anyone from the USC would like to come to provide a comment. That'll be on July 20th, so we have a little bit of time for the in-person comment. But if the commission is comfortable voting to perhaps have the policy committee draft a statement in support, but also noting obviously some of the additional things like Roberta mentioned of really looking at pruning in the overlay zones, wildfire hazard zones. If there's other recommended next steps from the commission as well, so feel free to include that also.
All right, thanks, Brian. this, Daniel, chair of the policy committee, Brian was suggesting that a member of the policy committee might support this. I want to check with you to see if that's a process that you feel comfortable with if we're going to go forward on voting. It is putting additional work on your plate as policy committee chair to try to ensure that that gets done. Just want to see, is there anything that we want to flag or think about before we move forward on a vote there, including the policy committee to provide a letter of support?
I think this sounds pretty straightforward, pending what happens on this vote, of course. But I think this should be pretty easy. And I would say if anybody has, any of the commissioners have any issues that you'd like to see included in the letter, like, we're going to obviously say something about pruning in defensible space, fire in those areas. But if anybody else has any other issues that we should include, please mention it. I mean, I haven't heard, other than that, I haven't heard any big controversies so far. I think a lot of the controversial issues that we flagged the first time the commission looked at this have kind of been moved to the next round that's going to happen later. So that, I'm sure that the main strategy here is to get as many of these through as quickly as we can. So I think this is probably going to be pretty simple thing to do.
Okay. Thanks, Daniel. So I think we're ready to check in on this with everyone with a vote. We're just looking at the amendments that Nick presented on today. And if there are other clarifications the policy committee wants to make, that's really up to the policy committee based on the conversation we've had today. But we're looking to basically check about supporting urban forestry, advancing this particular set of Title 11 amendments so that we can eventually go to City Council at the end of July. So we have a little bit of time, but I think I'd like to get this out of the way, if you will. We've had some good amount of time for deliberation. And so let me look to you all. Bruce.
I move that we support the amendments brought forth by the urban forestry staff, and that support be expressed in a letter by the policy committee that will go to City Council, and that the policy committee, I'll stop there. So a letter from the policy committee in support and to the appropriate individuals and staff.
Okay. I hear two things there. One is supporting it, and two is enabling the policy committee to move forward on a letter to express that support. So second on that motion?
Second.
Adrian, second. Okay, all in favor, virtual or physical hand? See 3 virtuals and okay. All opposed? All right, any abstentions? All right, so moved. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Brian. Very exciting.
Thanks, everyone.
To see this move forward. These are time-rich processes, I guess. They take a fair bit to move through. And we first heard about this back, I think, the beginning of the year, and now we're at a really good state. Bruce.
Is it invited testimony to have someone speak to the city commission that says we support that? Is that deemed as helpful by urban forestry?
Yeah, that would be great. And I think we can coordinate that when we get a little bit closer. It will be a public hearing of City Council, so anyone can sign up, but we would love to have invite testimony from the UFC as well.
All right. We'll come back to that then. Thanks for that reminder, Bruce. We're ready to move to Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland update.
Yeah, this will be a really quick item because I want to provide time to talk about the residential infill issue at the very end. But basically, the Healthy Portland team asked that I give a brief update on the status of that that project. I think that project might be new to some of our newer members of the commission as well. So I'm realizing that could be helpful. But mostly the intent of this is to ask the UFC how they would like to be involved in the next round of work. This is mostly to be sensitive to the commission, what the commission wants to see coming to UFC meetings and how the commission wants to be spending the limited meeting time that they have. So I'm going to talk through a brief PowerPoint, just a few minutes, just to highlight what this process is, what the purpose of the project is, and how the project team is asking for the UFC to be involved in it. Let me pull that up. All right. So a little brief background. Parks launched the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland project in late 2020. Last spring, the project team came to the UFC to get your input on high-level questions around the Bureau's mission, vision, and values. And today I'm just giving you a quick update on what the team has accomplished and what's in store for 2022. So for those who are familiar with the project and a little bit new, just some of our newer members of the commission, Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland is a cyclical process of continuous improvement with a regular cadence of community listening and learning. In this process, the Bureau is centering Black people, Indigenous people, people of color, refugees and immigrants, LGBTQIA+ people, youth, older adults, people earning low incomes, and people living with disabilities. Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland will help the Bureau integrate planning strategies and align efforts at all levels of the organization. There are really four main deliverables of this project. There's a listening and learning process, which is where a lot of the community outreach is taking place. A decision support tool. This is a tool designed to support Bureau decision making in the future. Mission, vision, values, and racial equity statements, which is actually the part that is happening right now, which is what we'll be asking the commission's feedback on how they'd like to be involved in that work. And then action and results framework. Each of these deliverables is supported by a work team, and representatives of the UFC have been involved. Greg Everhart has been on the mission, vision, values, and racial equity statement team, and then Jeanette has been representing the UFC on the actions and results team. The listening and learning process is sort of diagrammed in this diagram here. And it really just sort of shows the sort of iterative, regular process of co-designing this work, bringing it back out for public comment. I'm gonna skip ahead to the really critical part though, and that is this slide on. Sorry, let me gather my notes here on mission, vision, values, and racial equity statement. So this is the one where I mentioned that Greg Everhart has been involved. So this team has worked together over a series of 6 workshops to draft new options for mission, vision, values, and racial equity statements, along with what those outcome categories are for the Bureau. The team has considered what they've heard from the community during wave 1 of listening and learning, and what they've heard in the past as well. The draft mission, vision, values, and racial equity statements are being tested right now during a second wave of community listening and learning that will take place from May through September 2022. And I'm going to stop the presentation right now because that's really the sort of critical part of what we're asking from the UFC is if that second wave of listening and learning related to those mission, vision, values, and racial equity statements, if the UFC wants to be involved in that. And part of that is coming from when the project team presented this work last spring. the UFC gave some really helpful feedback, but I know there were also some members of the commission who felt like involvement in this may not be the best use of the commission's time. And so being sensitive to that and how we set the future meeting agendas, we wanted to have a sort of brief conversation of how the UFC would like to be involved, how they like to be engaged. And this could be having the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland team come to the UFC and provide a more full update and presentation, along with some of the draft language of those statements that have been developed. It could also be inviting a representative from the UFC to attend some of the other outreach work that's happening over the next few months from May to September. So just wanted to open it up for a conversation about that.
All right, Adrian, and then
Yeah, I just want to mention, like most of you guys know that I'm also on the Portland Parks and Rec board, and I'm on the Actions and Results team. And I wanted to actually commend the Urban Forestry Commission. I believe we had one presentation, one or two from about this in the past. And if you remember, originally, the word tree was not even in the plan for for Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland. And so it's come a really long way since then. And in fact, in Actions and Results, they've prioritized quite a number of climate change related things thus far. I mean, it's in draft form, and tree health related things and canopy health related things. So I want to put in a plug for actually making sure that we stay engaged and hear what that next draft is, because I think we've made a difference so far and probably could continue to. It seems like it's going in the right direction from my perspective, but we need everyone's perspective.
great. Thanks, Adrian. Megan.
Yeah, I think I have similar thoughts. That doesn't mean I'm volunteering, but in just that, for context, for those that weren't there in the past, when Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland came to present, we had a lot of concerns about the fact that even in presenting the information about their efforts, like trees weren't talked about. It really just wasn't like in creating the mission, visions, values for parks. Even in the questions, they didn't talk about really trees. They didn't talk about urban forestry. Like it was kind of absent. And then we were asked to give our feedback and how we felt about that. And I think our main feedback was, how can we talk about what we would see when the very thing that we're here to comment on isn't even included in how this is presented on? So just giving context to, I think, that lack, it concerns me if we weren't to be engaged in some ways that might persist.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. Daniel?
A comment and a question. When Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland was first started, as I recall, there was a big component of it that had to do with funding. And if we go back a few years on this commission, we spent a lot of time trying to get the city to look at ways that they could take on the planting and maintenance of street trees, because there is a major equity issue there in that people who don't have a lot of money aren't going to be able to afford street trees, so they're not going to ask for it. And in fact, the Urban Forestry Commission convinced the city council to put $70,000 into a study to find ways of doing that. And that kind of got subsumed into the greater Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland. So if we're going to continue working with Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland, I want to make sure that this issue about the city looking for ways to find funding to take on street tree maintenance doesn't continue to get dropped, as it appears to have been dropped. We haven't really heard much about it. Let's keep that on the front burner. Let's keep putting the pressure, because we've recognized that that's like about the most important equity issue for trees in the city of Portland. So let's not let that fall.
Brian, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, just really quickly. There are obviously a lot of different bureau processes happening at once. And just a quick clarification, the street tree issue was subsumed by Sustainable Future, which is the project specifically looking at long-term sustainable funding for the Bureau. Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland is more of a community listening project. So just to clarify the distinction there, those two are going to be informing each other though. So the connection is still there, and it is still a relevant issue to be highlighting the issue of street tree maintenance, street tree equity concerns, tying them to the canopy and equity that we have. That's totally appropriate. I just want to note that the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland won't be looking at funding specifically. It will be informing funding decisions in the future, but just want to make that quick distinction there.
Thanks for clarifying, and sorry I confused those two, even though there is a linkage there.
So many things moving. Bruce?
Oh God, it just disappeared, whatever it was. I'm sorry. Sorry. Forget it. I'm not here.
Well, in the spirit of integrating as well, and I just want to bring this to the commissioner's attention maybe, is just, I've been thinking a lot about the fact that we have simultaneously this process of residential infill moving forward. We have I think a recognized concern about the relationship between housing, its need, our need for housing, our need for designs that allow for green space to emerge. What we've seen before residential infill going from 2014 to 2020 is a decline of trees, both on private as well as public spaces. And so one of the, at least my thoughts of where my thoughts go with this is about the relationship between areas that are going to undergo rapid residential infill. And those are areas in at least my my observation, those are areas that have been historically kind of had a lot less attention by the city historically than disinvested in by the city over time. And those are often the areas that absorb a lot of the residential infill. And as we've talked about in the past, those are the areas that would likely lose a lot of tree canopy. So the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland listening session, I guess one of the things I'm wondering about is how to contextualize that kind of existing reality of potential rapid acceleration of canopy loss in areas that do undergo infill, whereas, you know, many of the other areas that won't necessarily absorb a lot of that density will end up kind of maintaining backyards, maintaining, you know, green spaces. And so the bigger question is, communities that have some small assemblage of green space may lose that through development processes coming up. And so what's the role that Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland in terms of green space and park creation? Parks will end up becoming a far more important resource for communities that lose that green space. And so in the listening sessions, I guess I'm wondering two things. One is that context of what's happening and what's happened in the past, making its way into the listening sessions. And the other is the role that even small parks play in being able to allow communities that are losing green space to have access to green space in and around their community. Like, those simultaneous things seem like they're important contextual conversations that need to find their way into the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland conversation. And if we're just listening to people, that's great. Though part of it is like, can we put it into context as we're moving forward on those listening sessions? And I just don't know how that's exactly happening. And I guess I'm just voicing that. Maybe it's a question in there somewhere. I'll think about it some more, but I just wonder if we can provide that context to communities when we're going out and listening to them about their concerns. Adrian?
Yeah, as you were speaking, Vivek, it made me feel, you know, a couple of things. Yeah, as they're doing community listening, getting some expertise in there about this, but even possibly even more importantly, may be really reasonable actually for Urban Forestry Commission to present to Portland Parks and Rec board. So, you know, maybe our advisory group, Urban Forestry Commission, presenting to them, because I think we kind of have some insights and perspective on this that are just a little bit different. And I think it would be useful as this plan is evolving to have that kind of higher strategic exchange. You know, we were already successful in highlighting the importance of trees and yeah, and then an aside, so I think the good thing is that there has been a big focus in Portland Parks and Rec in trying to systematically improve the green spaces that have been overlooked. And the Parks Foundation has been getting involved and has had some really good wins and models for wins for a combination of private public funding. So, you know, so I think there's hope there.
Thanks, Adrian. Bruce, I come back to you.
Yes, I remembered. So Greg Everhart and Anjanette have both been serving on various committees that are part of the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland effort. And I would be interested in hearing from both of them as to what their perspective is on how that's going. Does it seem like a good process? Are they glad they're doing it? Or do they think it's a waste of time? So I mean, it's great to have them there, and I'd really like to hear from their experiences if they're available.
Yeah. Great. And Jeanette, thanks for offering, I'm noticing in the chat, thanks for offering to get some more info on that. It'd be great to have, you know, I want to be sensitive to how much you're committing to. You're serving on so many different parts of our commission. So also if you're open to it, it'd be great to have you on that conversation with Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland as well. Well, this is, yeah, anybody else? Thanks for the update, Brian. This is really, I'm grateful that Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland's coming back to us. Like that feels like a really good process to me, that they're checking in with us and like having this input. I know we were initially, I don't know, my gauge was we were somewhat critical in terms of the way it was represented. I think they really kind of reconfigured that, came back to us, and then now checking in with us about how we want to be involved. So I just at least convey through you that, you know, the commission, I think, is grateful for at least the opportunity to continue to stay involved with the process as much as they're open to. All right. That's the end of our formal agenda. We have a little bit of time left, and before I get too eager to give you back 15 minutes or 45 minutes of your time, however you've allotted for this commission here, just want to open it up to any walk-on items. I will just maybe start that off with a comment about the retreat that Brian had sent a note about. I just want to bring that to your attention. We do have that scheduled. It's happening at Leach Botanical Garden, thanks to Bruce, who brought that up to us. And it's looking at June 6th, Monday. It looks like we have the majority, if not all, commissioners who can attend that. It's very exciting to see that actually appear. It's a Monday from 8:30 to 12:30. And there's a survey as well as a food preference that Brian has requested on his May 16th, 3:49 p.m. email to us. And I'm hoping you'll get back to him about the dietary preferences. Looks like there's breakfast and lunch served. So double woot woot for food that's going to be showing up while we can keep our focus on the material at hand. Grateful for the catering that we'll have there. And then we're really lucky to have Twee Tu, who is a former commissioner, urban forestry commissioner, who's also a professional facilitator to actually engage us in that conversation, really focusing on issues of priorities. And we've kicked that around for a little bit. We'll have a good chunk of time. I'm meeting with TWE along with Brian about the way we want to structure it. If you have ideas about the way you want to structure it, please send Brian and or me kind of ideas that you have about that. The focus is on priorities, and then kind of the process and structure of the Urban Forestry Commission committees, like deliberations, these Thursday morning conversations, if there's any improvements we can make to this. So in the meantime, please kind of just think about those ideas of priorities as well as structure and process as we lead up to that June 6th event. Roberta, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'd like to revisit what Brian brought to us earlier in the meeting, the walk-in item that he brought to us.
Yeah.
I think that the implications of the proposal the council is considering has huge implications for trees. The R5 zoning is the predominance of lots in the city. And if there's that kind of coverage allowed and the reduction in open space as part of, I mean, I think I would propose that the Forestry Commission submit it. They're accepting actual written comments until 2 o'clock, Brian.
Yeah.
So I would, if we could pull it off, I would suggest the Forestry Commission submit a written statement to the City Council in writing, like as soon as possible. It can be short. I think if this was proposed last week, there's a process issue. There hasn't been sufficient time to evaluate the implications of this, and we think they are great. And the other issue is that this is not the time to be, we're concerned about the potential for, significant amounts of increased impervious surfaces and reduced open space for trees at this point in time across much of the city. So I think asking them, at least to defer action and to do more analysis of this and to provide that to the public for review specifically of these amendments. And if folks would agree that there should be a statement, it's possible that maybe the staff could even draft it for review by VVIC or something to be submitted.
I think we need more internal discussion about the implications of the density.
Yeah.
But for now, I think process is the biggest issue, because we need to talk about, the implications of housing versus the tree canopy. And that's such a bigger issue that we need time for. So I think I would agree with, let's just, wave some flags and say, process, we need more time.
Yeah, and I'll say that's going to be the gist of what Urban Forestry is submitting as well, is just not time to consider what are the impacts here to both existing trees, but from the diagrams I've seen, it's not clear that Title 11's on-site tree density requirements could be actually met given the amount of space there is.
Right. Okay. I think Roberta, your hand's still up, but Bruce?
So I don't know if maybe Brian said this. This is not a requirement from the state. This was an amendment that was brought forth by some people at the city council hearing, and the city commissioners adopted, but they're not doing it. It's not a requirement from the state. So I know there's a fast timeline. I mean, we have to have something in place by, I think, July 1st. But if this particular provision was not in there, we have met the state's requirements. So I'm just, that's accurate, isn't it, Brian? I mean,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. The intention of the project was to bring other zones into compliance with state requirements. This amendment is going beyond that. So I've put the link to provide comments on this. Individual members are free to provide comments. I guess the question is, does the commission want to authorize one person to just submit a comment and note that they are submitting it on behalf of the Urban Forestry Commission?
Daniel?
Do you want to answer that question before we go on to my issue?
Yeah, I guess that, yeah, I see. I thought you were going to respond to that.
No, and I definitely don't have time in the next 2 hours to take this on.
So Brian, would you state the question again, just so for clarification?
Yeah, it's just it's whether the UFC would like to submit a formal comment and have someone submit that. And honestly, I could actually submit it and say that I'm representing the UFC. I would just need direction from the commission on what they would like to say. If it's mostly about process, mostly about, or it can be all the above. If it's we're concerned about the impacts on trees, and we'd like to request more time for this code change.
Adrienne, you have a response to that?
Yeah, so I propose that we authorize Brian to go ahead and put something in, since it's a tight timeline on our behalf.
Sure.
The larger strategic issue that needs more review and more time.
Yeah, okay. Seeing some agreement around that. Can we get a kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down for that in terms of Brian moving forward on at least a process question, Adrian's suggestion? Yeah, okay, any thumbs down? Virtual or otherwise? Okay, that wasn't a thumb down, I was just suggesting. How
Great.
to thumb down. Thanks, Brian, for taking that on. That's going to be really helpful for us to at least get a little bit of time to work through some of these bigger implications.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I'll actually just really quickly note, Leah just made a great comment about, I'm concerned about the either or framing with housing and green spaces. We need to see and communicate the examples for both spaces for both. If I can just take a minute before we get to anything else. One of the things I was actually going to email the commission about after this, but since we have just a minute here in the meeting, I've been talking with staff from the Bureau of Development Services, some folks from Urban Forestry and Plans and Sustainability of bringing a presentation on that specifically to the commission next month in June, to really give an overview of what do trees in development look like right now, what's allowed, what are the types of developments that are allowed, what is the space given for trees on site. Vivek, to your point about where are we expecting to see these development types happen, like the residential infill project. And so if I can just kind of get a thumbs up or a thumbs down, if people are interested in having a presentation like that, our goal is to really have the whole meeting on that, to allow for a lot of conversation afterwards within the commission, to ask the city staff any questions as well, maybe talk about what are some potential code changes there too.
Yeah, almost feels like, yeah, I think that'd be tremendously valuable. We don't
Great.
know what the speed or the pace of this is yet, but it sounds like a really valuable opportunity to kind of dig into this a little bit more, understand that, like the physical implications, the kind of framing implications, as well as kind of the code that might help to support either or and I guess.
Yep.
Okay.
Agreed. Thanks everyone.
Great. All right, Daniel?
Yeah, thanks, Vivek. I just wanted to give everybody an update. Since last month at the UFC meeting, you authorized the policy committee to testify and write a letter to the Water Bureau about the rules. So I just wanted to give a little bit of update. This will be real quick. The policy committee put together a letter to send in on comments. Thank you, Bruce, who took that one on, and Megan also, and Roberta. I was not able to do that this past month. And I guess just to remind everybody of the issue, currently the Water Bureau has a policy where in order to have a tree in the public right of way, you need a minimum of 10 feet of distance. To have a tree that will get no larger than 12 inches in diameter breast height, and any a pipe conducting 24 inches or more in diameter. So, what this boils down to is that large form trees, that's even less space for large form trees in the right of way. So I also testified at the Water Bureau hearing last night. Bruce was also at that meeting. There weren't a lot of people testifying, but I think everybody was sending a pretty consistent message. Both in terms of climate change and equity, because we do know that the places where street trees are needed the most tend to be in the areas that we have the lowest income residents. So that's a message. And it's interesting that seems to be the message that we send to a lot of bureaus on a lot of projects. And in our comments, written and oral, we have mentioned, that there is this cumulative impact, right? We look at all these different agency plans that we seems like we review almost a new agency plan every month. And in every single one of them, we see that there's like a shrinking number of spaces for large form trees around the city. So it's kind of this death by 1,000 cuts, ha ha ha. But in the federal NEPA law, they're required to consider cumulative impacts. And with the way we have our city government, the form of city government, the different bureaus, and we see this over and over again, that because of the form of city of government, the bureaus don't coordinate as well as they could if we had a different form. That's a different question, but there really is this cumulative impact. And I think that it's important for us to keep bringing this up when we comment, when we talk to different bureaus, because it's like the pedestrian design guide, there aren't as many spaces for trees. The Water Bureau, residential infill 2 and 1, and a lot of these other plans. And, trees continue to be an afterthought and not considered critical infrastructure. And I feel like these are comments that we like send out to every bureau and every letter we do. And if anyone has any ideas about how we could present, maybe this is just this issue of cumulative impacts of shrinking space for large form trees. Maybe we just need to talk to city council and say, hey, look, Portland is a city of trees, but maybe not anymore. And especially if you look at outer East Portland, it has the same canopy as the city of Los Angeles, basically canopy coverage. And so we might want to think maybe this is something for the retreat about how we can get some of these really key big picture messages across rather than just doing it one plan at a time. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Daniel. Good fodder for our retreat conversation as well, no doubt. Great. Well, anything? We're coming up on 11:30 here. We were really solid with time. Thanks, Brian, for the little extra time buffer today. Made my job a little bit easier. And so I know we'll follow up and have several developments as we move into the retreat planning session. We have that before our June meeting. So this is in between the May meeting and June meeting. We'll be seeing you all in person at Leach for that. And in the meantime, actually it's right after our last meeting. I'll just do a final shameless plug for a event that's happening during the last week of June, which a few of us have been arranging. I've talked to Brian a little bit about this, but we're arranging for a commemoration of it's come up here a lot, the Heat Dome event that happened the last week of June in 2021 that killed almost 60 plus, at least officially, in Portland, city of Portland, and first climate related deaths from a heat event. Most of those were in East Portland and areas that are undergoing rapid loss of tree canopy, as we've talked about. So we're putting together an event called Heat Week. It's a heat awareness. It's a commemoration of those who died during the event last year, as well as an opportunity to have conversations about preparedness planning. I'm going to put a little website up in the chat for you to check out. If you there's a couple of events that are invitation, but other events that are happening that are virtual and open to everybody. But just wanted to put that on your radar as you're thinking about your summer plans. We're going to also be hosting at least we're going to be hosting that for that entire week, and it overlaps exactly with that one year anniversary. And I'm hoping that will be an opportunity for us to kind of continue the conversation about the role that trees play, policy plays, and what we can do for the shade question that trees provide. So just, again, shameless plug, a lot of community groups coming together. We're right now in the process of trying to find sponsorship for it as well. So if you know of folks who might support something like this with community-based organizations and helping to build the kind of awareness and resource base for folks who are possibly new to managing for heat. So just FYI. Yeah, thanks, Brian. Thanks, commissioners. I will call the meeting to a close and we'll see you at the retreat. Looking forward to that.
Thanks, everyone. See y'all soon.
All right.